Good evening. I'll just give it a couple of minutes just to make sure everybody has joined in. I hope a good week. Um, got a couple of things. Hopefully this evening will be a blessing. But let's put that there. Bless the Lord. Bless the Lord. So yeah, like I said, I hope you had a good week. It's been an interesting few days out here at the barn. We have a couple of footpaths that run quite near to us. Not directly up against us, but near enough that we can see them from the garden. And I've been out just trying to do a little bit of stuff for the spring and a little bit more recording, which has been a lot of fun. But on Saturday, with the great weather, folk from our village who were desperately trying to social distance decided to go for a walk. Not one family or two families, but a lot of families. And watching them trying to negotiate the lane and then the footpath, which is nowhere near wide enough to be 6 feet apart, and trying to figure out ways of doing it. I'm sure it seemed like a bright idea at the time. I'm sure it seemed like it was a great thing to do. But one thing I particularly noticed was that group after group after group would get themselves in some clear space and climb up onto the bridge over the river. And when they got up onto the bridge, they would rest for a little minute, and they would all of them prop themselves on the bridge. It got me thinking about how often spiritually I find myself with lots of great theory about how God is my peace and God is my shelter. But if I am ever in a position where I have to really run and hide, where I have to put myself in the arms of God because I can't do anything else, because I don't have answers, I have no way of getting through it, all of a sudden I become stir crazy. My brain starts saying things like, well, but if I could just get to that meeting, if I could just gather with those people. As a musician, one of the things I find really strange is that I am confident in the fact that God hears me. Now, if you've listened to some of the other videos that we've put up on YouTube, you know that that takes a great deal of patience. But I have no doubt that God hears my fragile breath. God, whose voice shakes the heavens and the earth, condescends to rejoice over me with singing when I'm trying to rejoice over him with my rather weird husky voice. And yet, when I'm up against it, when I find myself wanting something more, instead of pushing deeper into him, if I'm not careful, I start planning which musicians will I hang out with, and which worship group will I be a part of, and which music shall I listen to today. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there's something wonderful and powerful about fellowship, and I've been amazed at the way in which in this season we've been able to connect with people over a much wider area because we've been forced to use the technology. That's been a real blessing. For those of you who we don't normally get to worship with, who have been participating in our Skype sessions and who have been connecting through these videos, it is such a blessing. But I began to wonder, what does the Bible have to say about people that are under house arrest? And what can we do with it? Well, I'm going to read you some verses. You'll probably be able to guess where they're from immediately on the first two words. This is an example of the scope or the scale of what is available to those that are under house arrest. The reading starts like this. I, John. You got where it is yet? We're looking just very quickly at one of the less spectacular moments in the opening chapter of Revelation. I, John, both your brother and companion in the tribulation and kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was on the island that is called Patmos for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice as of a trumpet saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what you see, write in the book and send it to the seven churches which are in Asia, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. John writes this in Revelation 1:10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. In the Spirit on the Lord's day. And in that position, despite the fact that physically he found himself in the prison colony at Patmos, despite the fact that he was by this stage very, very elderly and frail, and so was not able to get to fellowship and was not able to escape from his captors, and very much constrained in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Everything that follows in that extraordinary book of Revelation was what he saw, discovered, and learned, because he was not constrained by his physical limitations. That really began to get me thinking. And so I began to have a look at some other examples of the scale and the scope of where we can find ourselves, where we can explore in our God. Here's three things from the Psalms. Psalm 27, verses 4 and 5. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. You know, for the person writing that, they were able to write in this way. There was a physical temple, but a physical temple they couldn't enter into. They didn't have access. There wasn't a priest who could make their way into the physical presence. And so they're speaking about a different spiritual experience to their physical experience. They could look up and see where the ark was kept and see where the priests got to minister in the presence of the Lord. But they could say this, I want to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to inquire in his temple. I don't know about you. It's one thing to sit quietly in a room with somebody that you love. But after a while, even that can become a little awkward if nobody is saying anything. Last week, in our Sunday morning, we talked a little bit about how to deal with prayer fatigue. The fact that if you make your request known with thanksgiving, the thanksgiving breaks up the monotony of the request, particularly when at the moment the request often seems to be familiar or is a repeat of the thing. While we are praying for loved ones and praying for a nation and praying for people that are suffering this one disease, our requests can go on and on and on and seem to be the same request again and again. How do we avoid prayer fatigue? Well, make your request known with thanksgiving. But also, how do you avoid becoming spiritually stagnant? How do you avoid feeling awkward? Well, don't just behold the beauty of the Lord, but inquire in his temple. John, under house arrest, doesn't say to Jesus, leave me alone, I can't go anywhere. He sets out on this extraordinary trip through time and eternity, through space and the heaven that is beyond the current space and time. He finds himself caught up in such an extraordinary vision, moving through all of God's eternal purposes in a way that for thousands of years we are only now beginning in small parts to grasp. And he does it all while he's under arrest on Patmos. Psalm 84, 1-4, is very familiar to most people who are Christians. Certainly to most people in the UK, we sang various versions of it all the way through the 90s and the noughties, extraordinary lengths, very, very much repeating it over and over again. So it's sort of ingrained in us. But like many things that you repeat over and over again, if you're not careful, it loses its impact. Psalm 84, 1-4 says, how lovely is your tabernacle, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, yes, even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for you, the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for her young, where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They will still be praising you. Selah. You know, if I think about my home, I'm very blessed because of where I live. But if I think about my home, after a few weeks, I've seen it all. I've seen it all. I know every nook and cranny. You'll be amazed at the things that I have seen in the last few days. We were moving some things around in the kitchen, and I found a T-shirt that I thought I'd put in the wash 3 years ago and lost. It turns out I hadn't. I dropped it down the back of the freezer. But the reality is this: that within my finite confines, I have access to the very thrones of God. No one would say that a sparrow has some supernatural experience, that somehow they see what we don't see, or they get to nest somewhere more exotic than our vines out the back of our house. But the reality is this: even the sparrow has found a home and the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. If God cares for the birds of the air in such a way, if they are able to experience the security and the joy of dwelling in the altars of God, how can we be worried about house arrest or being under lockdown? One last psalm, I love this. Psalm 91, 1 and 2. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In Him I will trust. You know, as the lockdown tightens and we see the desperate need for us as Christians really to have a clear witness, to not be messing around with the health of other people, we might become increasingly stir crazy. But if our one heart, if our one desire is to seek the Lord and to inquire in His temple, if we acknowledge that God is our refuge and God is our fortress, if we decide that we're going to commit ourselves to the secret place, to dwell under the shadow of Almighty God, then like John, we can expect to see things that eye has not yet seen, ear not heard, nor has entered into the heart of anyone what God has prepared, yes, for the future, but actually for now, for those who love Him. What's the one thing you're seeking? If you really love Jesus, I believe you can set your heart on that relationship, and you don't need to leave home to go somewhere truly, utterly amazing. Lord bless you. I hope you have a great week. I hope you're keeping well. If you've been going through this awful infection, I hope you're on the mend. We continue to pray for you. If you want to gather with us on Sundays or during the week on a Wednesday night, we use Skype and we meet at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. That's UK time, and 8 p.m. on Wednesday evenings. We would love for you to be a part of that, and you can get the links and everything on our social media if you just go to facebook.com/Street Harvest. Thank you ever so much for all your encouragement, and the Lord bless you and keep you. I'll hopefully either see you soon or speak to you soon. God bless.